The maintenance corridors of Europa Station hummed with the constant drone of life support systems. Marcus Reed adjusted his tool belt as he made his way through the labyrinth of pipes and conduits, each step echoing in the confined space. 20 years of maintaining the station's vital systems had taught him every creak, every subtle variation in the machinery's song. When something was wrong, he knew it before any diagnostic system could flag it. He wasn't supposed to be here, not in this restricted section. But the temperature fluctuations in Block C7 had been bothering him for days. The official maintenance logs showed everything within normal parameters, but Marcus knew better. He'd seen similar patterns before the Titan Station disaster 3 years ago. Back then, no one had listened to the maintenance crew's warnings either. The message from his wife Catherine still played in his mind from their morning call. Be careful, love. Something feels off about those new security contractors. Catherine's instincts, honed by 15 years in special operations, were rarely wrong. But Marcus had dismissed her concerns with a gentle laugh. They're just corporate suits with fancy badges, Cat. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. He reached the main junction box for C7's environmental controls and popped open the access panel. The sight inside made his blood run cold. The safety interlocks had been deliberately bypassed, the backup systems disconnected. This wasn't wear and tear or system failure, this was sabotage. Marcus pulled out his datapad and began documenting everything. The evidence was clear, someone was setting up the station for catastrophic failure. He was so focused on his work that he didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. Well. Looks like we have a curious little maintenance rat. The voice belonged to Roland Hayes, head of Delcorp's new security detail. He wasn't alone. Marcus slowly turned around, facing 3 armed men in corporate security uniforms. The environmental systems have been tampered with. This whole section could decompress if... If what, Mr. Reed? If someone were to create a tragic accident? Hayes stepped forward, his smile never reaching his eyes. An accident that would force evacuation of this section, perhaps. One that might necessitate moving certain sensitive materials through unconventional channels. The pieces clicked into place. The restricted access, the unusual cargo movements, the new security team's irregular patrols. Marcus had stumbled onto something much bigger than faulty environmental controls. You can't just. Actually, we can. And we will. Hayes nodded to his men. The sad thing is, Mr. Reed, you were good at your job. Too good. But maintenance workers have accidents all the time in these old stations. Faulty equipment, poor safety protocols, it's all very tragic. Marcus backed away, his hand brushing against the open junction box. Catherine will know. She'll figure it out. Hayes laughed. Ah yes, the wife. Former special operations, isn't she? Currently teaching self-defense classes to bored corporate wives on level 4. Don't worry about her. By the time anyone investigates, there won't be anything to find. Marcus's fingers closed around a heavy wrench. He might not make it out alive, but he could leave evidence. Something for Catherine to find. He swung the wrench at the nearest guard, connecting with a satisfying crunch. Alarms blared as he slammed the wrench into the exposed circuitry behind him. The lights flickered. Emergency shutters began closing throughout the section. Hayes's face contorted with rage as he raised his weapon. Stupid maintenance rat. Could have been quick and clean. The last thing Marcus saw was the muzzle flash. His final thought was of Catherine, and a silent prayer that she would understand the message he'd left behind in the station systems. Hours later, when they found his body, the official report would cite an unfortunate accident during routine maintenance. A tragic malfunction in an aging station's systems. But they didn't know Catherine Reed. Didn't understand that they hadn't just killed a maintenance worker, they'd created their own destruction. In their arrogance, they assumed she was just another washed-up veteran teaching basic self-defense to pass the time. They didn't know about her real work, the off-books operations she'd run, the networks she still maintained. They would learn, but by then, it would be far too late. As news of Marcus's death spread through the station, Catherine Reed sat in their quarters, staring at his empty chair. There were no tears, no outward signs of grief. Just a cold, calculating silence as she began to plan. She had taught her students that revenge was an emotion, but vengeance was an art. Now, she would show Delcorp's killers the difference. The station's lights dimmed for the night cycle, shadows lengthening across empty corridors. In the darkness, a predator began to stir, and the hunt was about to begin. The investigation into Marcus Reed's death lasted exactly 6 hours. Delcorp's efficiency in closing cases was legendary, especially when those cases involved their own interests. Catherine watched the official announcement from her terminal, her face illuminated by the soft blue glow of multiple screens. Tragic accident during routine maintenance, the corporate spokesman declared. Our thoughts are with the family. Catherine's fingers moved across the keyboard without pause. While Delcorp's security team had been sanitizing the accident scene, she'd been busy with her own work. Marcus had taught her about Europa Station systems over the years, and she'd taught him a few tricks of her own. Like the hidden subroutines in the maintenance logs, the backup security feeds that reported to private servers, and the dead drops they'd established in the station's vast network. Access denied flashed across her screen for the third time. Hayes's team had been thorough in locking down the official systems. But Catherine hadn't survived 15 years of black ops by relying on official channels. She switched to a different terminal, this one running code that hadn't seen the light of day since her last mission. The message Marcus had left was fragmented, scattered across multiple systems. To anyone else, it would look like routine maintenance data. But Catherine recognized the pattern. Block C-7. Environmental controls. Unauthorized cargo. Each piece a breadcrumb leading to something bigger. Her terminal chimed. A face appeared on the screen, Zara Wong, her contact in station operations. They're moving fast, Cat. 3 more security teams just arrived on the morning shuttle. Hayes is bringing in specialists. They're scared, Catherine replied, her voice flat. They should be. What about the cargo manifests I asked for? Officially, nothing unusual. But there's a pattern of power surges in the restricted storage areas. More energy than environmental systems should need, especially in supposedly empty sections. Catherine nodded. Marcus had noticed the same thing. And the new security routes? They've completely reorganized the patrols. Tighter coverage, no blind spots. Zara hesitated. Cat, they're setting up a kill box. The whole station's being locked down inch by inch. Good. Catherine's lips curved in a cold smile. That means they're looking in the wrong direction. They think the threat's coming from outside. She pulled up the station schematics, overlaying them with Marcus's maintenance logs. Hayes and his team had military training, corporate resources, and station-wide authority. But they had one critical weakness: they thought like soldiers. They secured access points, established overlapping fields of fire, and controlled choke points. Traditional tactics for traditional threats. Catherine had spent her career becoming the kind of threat no one expected. The terminal beeped again. One of her programs had found something, a pattern in the cargo manifests. Regular shipments labeled as environmental supplies, but requiring specialized handling and security clearance. The power surges Zara mentioned coincided perfectly with each delivery. What were you hiding from them, Marcus? She whispered, enhancing the grainy security footage from Block C-7. The image quality was poor, but she could make out Hayes and his men entering the restricted area. They moved with the confidence of people who believed themselves untouchable. That confidence had cost Marcus his life. Now it would cost them everything. Catherine opened a secure channel to an old contact. The response was immediate. Retired means retired, Cat. I don't do wet work anymore. I'm not asking for wet work, Raj. I need equipment. Specifically, the kind of equipment that doesn't exist. A long pause. This about the accident in Block C7. You know it wasn't an accident. Another pause. They're saying your husband got careless. Ignored safety protocols. Marcus never ignored protocols. He died trying to prevent a catastrophe. Hayes and his team murdered him to cover up whatever they're smuggling through the station. Hayes. Raja's voice sharpened. Roland Hayes. Ex-military, now Delcorp's chief of station security. You know him? Know of him. He used to run specialized cargo handling for some less than reputable corporations out in the belt. Nothing ever stuck, but there were rumors. Bad ones. Catherine's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up Hayes's personnel file. I need everything you have on him. His team too. Real backgrounds, not the sanitized corporate versions. That kind of intel isn't cheap, Cat. And it's not exactly legal. Neither is murder. She transmitted a series of numbers, account codes from her days in special operations. Whatever it costs. Raj whistled softly. You're really going to war with Delcorp? No. Catherine's eyes never left the screen where Hayes's face stared back at her. War implies both sides know they're fighting. This is going to be something else entirely. She spent the next 12 hours building her web. Every camera feed, every security patrol route, every maintenance schedule, all of it fed into her systems. Hayes's team had locked down the station, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail: everything they used to maintain control relied on systems her husband had maintained for 20 years. Marcus had known every backdoor, every bypass, every quirk in the station's aging infrastructure. And he'd shared that knowledge with her, piece by piece, over long nights when sleep wouldn't come and memories of past missions kept her awake. The first sign that something was wrong came at shift change. 3 security teams failed to check in on schedule. Hayes dispatched search parties, only to have them report all posts properly manned. The missing teams appeared an hour later, insisting they'd never been absent. Security logs showed continuous presence, but Hayes's personal records indicated a gap. Small discrepancies began appearing in inventory lists. Equipment requisitions didn't match delivery logs. Security cameras showed empty corridors that motion sensors reported as occupied. Each anomaly was minor, easily attributed to system glitches in an aging station. But they formed a pattern, one that only Hayes could see. Catherine watched through the station's eyes as he grew more agitated. She counted the extra weapons his men began carrying, noted the increased frequency of their patrols. They were starting to feel it, the sensation of being watched, of something moving just at the edge of vision. In her quarters, Catherine cleaned her old service weapon, the one that officially didn't exist. You should have checked my record more carefully, she told Hayes's image on her screen. Should have looked past the cover story. Special operations wasn't my real assignment. I hunted ghosts for a living, people who didn't exist, doing things that never happened. She loaded the weapon with practiced precision. Now I'm going to show you what it feels like to be haunted. The first real casualty of Catherine's campaign wasn't Hayes or any of his core team. It was a junior security officer named Trevor Mills, who made the mistake of bragging in the station's bar about helping clean up a maintenance accident. He disappeared during his next shift, only to be found 12 hours later locked in a decommissioned airlock, stripped to his underwear, with Marcus's maintenance logs tattooed across his chest in UV-reactive ink. He couldn't explain how he got there. The security cameras showed nothing. His access codes had been used to enter restricted areas he'd never visited. The log suggested he'd spent the missing hours methodically documenting every illegal operation Hayes had ever run through the station. Hayes had him quietly transferred off station, but the damage was done. His team started looking at each other differently, wondering who might be next. The second casualty was their complacency. Supply requisitions began disappearing. Equipment malfunctioned at critical moments. Security teams responding to alarms found themselves locked in corridors, their comm systems broadcasting their private conversations to the entire station. Catherine watched through the station's cameras as Hayes called an emergency meeting. His face was drawn, his uniform wrinkled. The confidence was gone from his stance. "Someone is targeting us specifically," Hayes told his team. "They have access to our systems, know our protocols. We need to." The lights cut out. When they came back on 3 seconds later, every screen in the room displayed the same image: Marcus Reed's maintenance badge, spinning slowly against a black background. "They're playing with us," one of the security officers said, his voice cracking. "Like a damn cat with a mouse." Hayes slammed his fist on the table. "It's her. Has to be. The wife. She's not just some washed-up vet teaching self-defense classes." "We checked her background," his deputy protested. "Multiple times. Nothing unusual. Check again. And get me direct line to corporate. We need." The screens changed again. Now they showed surveillance footage of Marcus's last moments. Hayes and his men cornering him. The muzzle flash. The cover-up. "That's impossible," Hayes whispered. "We wiped all the footage." A new image appeared, a detailed diagram of their smuggling operation. Every route, every contact, every bribe. 20 years of maintenance logs had given Marcus access to everything. He might not have understood what he was seeing at first, but he documented all of it. "Lock down everything," Hayes ordered. "Change all codes, switch to manual overrides. Nothing electronic, nothing networked. We do this old school." But Catherine was already ahead of them. As Hayes's team scrambled to contain the situation, she was making her next move. The evidence she'd gathered painted a picture far darker than simple smuggling. Delcorp wasn't just moving illegal goods through Europa Station, they were using it as a transit point for something much worse. The power surges, the specialized containment protocols, the heavy security, it all pointed to biological weapons research. Marcus had discovered their lab hidden in the restricted sections, disguised as environmental control systems. That's why he had to die. He wasn't just a witness to smuggling, he could have exposed a corporate weapons program that violated every treaty in the solar system. Catherine's terminal chimed. Raja's face appeared, looking worried. "Got those backgrounds you wanted?" Hayes isn't just ex-military. He ran Black Ops for Delcorp during the Mars insurgency. Specialized in making problems disappear. And his team? All hand-picked. Each with their own history of solving corporate problems. But here's the thing, they're not the top of the chain. Someone much bigger is running this operation. Catherine nodded. Victoria Chen. Raja's eyes widened. "How did you?" Marcus's logs. Every major change in station operations happened right after her inspection visits. She's Delcorp's Director of Special Projects, and she's due to arrive in 48 hours. Victoria Chen is untouchable. She has contacts in every major corporation and half the planetary governments. If you're thinking of. She ordered the hit on Marcus. Hayes just carried it out. You can't prove that. Catherine's smile was cold. Watch me. She switched off the terminal and pulled up the station schematics. Hayes and his team were running scared, making mistakes. But Victoria Chen was different. She was the kind of predator Catherine understood, patient, calculating, used to operating in shadows. Chen's arrival would change the game. She'd bring her own security, her own protocols. The station would become a fortress. But that's what Chen was expecting, an attack from the outside. She'd never suspect the threat was already inside, woven into the station's very systems. Catherine opened Marcus's final maintenance logs, the ones he'd hidden in the station's deepest archives. Inside was a detailed analysis of the containment lab's vulnerabilities, including one critical flaw: the fail-safes couldn't distinguish between a real emergency and a simulated one. "You always said every system had a breaking point," she whispered to Marcus's memory. "Time to test that theory." The next 12 hours saw a wave of system failures across the station. Nothing critical, just enough to keep Hayes's team running from emergency to emergency. They were so busy trying to maintain control that they didn't notice the subtle changes in the environmental systems. By the time Victoria Chen's shuttle docked, everything would be in place. Hayes thought Catherine was waging a war of revenge. He was wrong. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And justice required more than just eliminating the killers. It meant exposing the truth, no matter the cost. As she made her final preparations, Catherine remembered something Marcus used to say: "In space, the most dangerous problems aren't the ones that blow up in your face. They're the ones that build up slowly, unnoticed, until it's too late to stop them." Hayes and his team were about to learn just how right he'd been. Corporate wolves. Victoria Chen's arrival on Europa Station was marked by a precision that bordered on military efficiency. Her personal security detail swept through the docking bay like a well-oiled machine, their movements synchronized and deliberate. She emerged from her shuttle wearing an immaculate corporate suit that probably cost more than a year's salary for most station workers. Hayes met her at the airlock, trying to hide his exhaustion. "Director Chen, welcome to Europa Station. I apologize for the recent system irregularities. We're implementing new security protocols to..." "Save the excuses, Hayes." Chen's voice was silk over steel. "Your incompetence has already cost us valuable time. Show me the lab." Catherine watched through the station's cameras as they moved through the restricted sections. Chen's security team was different from Hayes's thugs. They moved like professionals, constantly scanning for threats. But they were looking in the wrong places. No one thought to check the maintenance crawlspaces where Catherine had spent the last week setting up her web. "Production is behind schedule," Chen was saying as they entered the lab. "Our clients are growing impatient. The latest strain needs to be ready for testing within." She stopped abruptly. The main display showed a complete breakdown of Delcorp's biological weapons program. Every test subject, every failed experiment, every covered-up death, all documented in Marcus's meticulous maintenance logs. "What is this?" Chen's composure cracked for the first time. "Hayes, explain." "It's her," Hayes stammered. "Reed's wife. She's somehow accessing our systems, using her husband's old maintenance codes to..." "I don't want excuses." Chen's voice cut like a razor. "I want this contained. Now. We're trying, but she's always one step ahead. She's not just some grieving widow. She's..." "I know exactly who Catherine Reed is." Chen pulled up a file on her personal device. "Or should I say, Commander Catherine Vale, Special Operations Division, Psychological Warfare Unit. Officially retired after the Europa incident 3 years ago." Hayes's face went pale. "The Europa incident? That was her?" "Indeed." Chen's smile was cold. "Which makes me wonder, Hayes, how your supposedly thorough background check missed something so significant. Those records were sealed. Everything can be unsealed, for the right price." Chen turned to her security chief. "Implement Protocol Omega. Full station lockdown. No communications in or out. And find me Catherine Reed." But Catherine was done hiding. As Chen gave the order, every screen in the lab flickered to life. The image was crystal clear: Marcus Reed's final moments, recorded from multiple angles. Hayes and his men cornering him. The murder. The cover-up. But now there was more: footage of the illegal weapons lab, documentation of unauthorized experiments, proof of corporate corruption at the highest levels. "What have you done?" Chen's whisper was barely audible. Catherine's voice came through the station's comm system, calm and measured. "What my husband died trying to do. Show the truth. You can't prove any of this." Chen's confidence was returning. "Delcorp's lawyers will already have their hands full," Catherine interrupted. "This isn't just playing on station screens. It's being broadcast to every major news outlet in the solar system. Corporate headquarters. Government oversight committees. Even your private clients." The color drained from Chen's face. "Override the system. Shut it down. You still don't understand." Catherine's voice held a note of pity. "This isn't about the system anymore. Marcus didn't just document your operation, he found your test subjects. The ones that survived. The ones you kept hidden in the supposedly decommissioned sections of the station. And now they're all talking." Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency containment protocols activated, not the fake ones Delcorp had set up, but the real ones Marcus had maintained. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing the lab section. "What's happening?" Hayes was practically screaming now. "The controls aren't responding." Marcus was very thorough in his maintenance logs, Catherine explained. "Including the proper procedures for containing a potential biological weapons leak. Which, according to station protocols, requires immediate quarantine of all potentially exposed personnel." Chen's mask of control finally shattered. "You can't do this. Do you have any idea who I am? Who I work for?" "I know exactly who you are, Victoria. You're the person who ordered my husband's murder because he discovered your illegal weapons lab. And now you're trapped in that same lab, surrounded by evidence of every crime Delcorp has committed here." Through the cameras, Catherine watched Chen's security team trying desperately to override the containment protocols. But Marcus had built in too many failsafes, too many redundant systems. The kind of safety measures Delcorp had ignored in their pursuit of profit. "Security teams are mobilizing throughout the station," Chen threatened. "They'll break through eventually." "Maybe," Catherine agreed. "But not before every piece of evidence has been secured. Not before the truth about Delcorp's experiments is exposed to the entire solar system. Marcus died trying to prevent a catastrophe. I'm making sure his death wasn't in vain." As if to punctuate her words, a new alarm sounded, station security forces approaching the lab section. But these weren't Delcorp's people. These were Earth government investigators, responding to the evidence Catherine had been feeding them for days. "It's over, Victoria," Catherine said softly. "The only question is how many people you're going to drag down with you." Justice in the void. The next few hours on Europa Station unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of chaos. Earth government investigators moved through the corridors with methodical precision, securing evidence and detaining Delcorp personnel. Victoria Chen's carefully constructed empire was crumbling, one damning piece of evidence at a time. Catherine watched it all through the station's systems, her fingers dancing across multiple terminals. She had achieved what she set out to do: expose the truth, secured justice for Marcus, and stopped Delcorp's illegal weapons program. But something felt unfinished. "You should be dead." Hayes's voice came through her private comm channel. He had somehow slipped away during the initial confusion, using his knowledge of the station's security blind spots. "That's what bothers me the most. We had your background checked. Your real background. The Europa incident should have killed you. It nearly did." Catherine continued monitoring the station feeds, tracking his movement through subtle disturbances in the environmental systems. 16 hours in hard vacuum after the station breach. They said survival was impossible. Then how? Marcus. Her voice softened at the memory. He was doing maintenance on the external arrays that day. Found me drifting, barely alive. Rigged my damaged suit to his own oxygen supply. Nearly killed himself getting me to medical. She could hear Hayes moving, trying to circle around to her position. He was good, better than his earlier performance suggested. But he was still thinking like a soldier, looking for tactical advantages in a conventional fight. That's why you retired. He was trying to keep her talking, distracted. Gave up your career to play house with a maintenance worker. I retired because I was tired of being the ghost in the machine, the weapon pointed at whatever target my superiors chose. Marcus showed me there was more to life than the mission. Her fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard. He saved more than my life that day. He saved my humanity. How touching. Hayes's voice dripped with sarcasm. And now you've thrown it all away for revenge. Become exactly what you tried to leave behind. You still don't understand. Catherine activated a sequence of commands she had prepared days ago. This was never about revenge. The station's lights flickered, and Hayes cursed as emergency shutters sealed off his planned escape routes. He was being herded, though he didn't realize it yet. The difference between revenge and justice, Catherine continued, is that revenge is about making yourself feel better. Justice is about making sure it never happens again. Hayes found himself in Marcus's old maintenance office. The door sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. On the main screen, footage began playing, not of Marcus's death, but of his life. 20 years of service logs. Countless lives saved through his diligence. Problems spotted before they became disasters. He was a better person than any of us, Catherine said softly. He believed in doing things right, in fixing what was broken. Not just machines, but people too. He's the one who taught me that real strength isn't in knowing how to hurt people, it's in knowing how to help them. Very philosophical. Hayes drew his weapon. But philosophy won't save you when. The floor beneath him suddenly became transparent, revealing the station's exterior hull far below. He was standing on reinforced glass, the void of space visible beneath his feet. Marcus installed these observation panels, Catherine explained. Said everyone should see what they're really standing on out here. Understand the responsibility we have to each other when we're all that stands between life and the void. Hayes fired at the door, but the bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the reinforced metal. What are you going to do? Space me like Chen's other problems? No. Catherine's voice was firm. You're going to face justice. Real justice, not corporate cleanup. The evidence has already been transmitted. Your connection to the weapons program, the murders, everything. You'll stand trial alongside Chen and the others. They'll never make it stick. Delcorp's lawyers won't help. The corporations are already distancing themselves. Chen's private files included contingency plans to eliminate everyone involved if the program was exposed. You were never anything but disposable to them, Hayes. Just like you thought Marcus was disposable. The station's security forces were approaching now, real security, not Delcorp's people. Hayes knew it was over. His shoulders slumped as the fight drained out of him. He asked about you, Hayes said quietly. At the end. Wanted us to tell you he was sorry. Catherine's hands stilled on the keyboard. Sorry for what? For not listening when you said something felt wrong. His last words were, tell Kat she was right. Tears finally came then, the first she had allowed herself since Marcus's death. Not tears of grief or rage, but of release. Of letting go. The security team breached the door, taking Hayes into custody. Throughout the station, Delcorp's house of cards continued to fall. Victoria Chen and her inner circle faced multiple life sentences. The weapons program was exposed, its victims given voice and vindication. Corporate reforms were already being drafted. Later, in their quarters, their home, Catherine sat in Marcus's chair, looking at the stars through the viewport he had insisted on installing. "You were wrong about one thing, love," she whispered. "I was right about the danger, but you were right about what mattered. Not the fighting or the dying, but the living. The fixing. The helping." She pulled up the station's maintenance logs one last time. Marcus's system access was still active, she hadn't had the heart to delete it. Instead, she began typing. Maintenance log, Europa Station. Critical systems check complete. All functions normal. Repairs successful. System integrity restored. It wasn't just a log entry. It was a promise, to carry on his work, to fix what was broken, to help where she could. Not as a weapon or a ghost, but as something Marcus had helped her become, human. The station hummed around her, its systems working in harmony just as Marcus had always maintained them. In the void of space, Europa Station continued its eternal orbit, its lights a beacon in the darkness. And in those lights, a legacy lived on, not of revenge, but of justice. Not of destruction, but of repair. Not of ending, but of beginning anew.